this is the third webinar that we're doing in these times of, whatever is going on in the world at the moment. And this was an opportunity where a lot of practitioners had a little bit more time on hand. And I just really wanted to share education and clinical tools with everybody. And that's why I came up with this idea that about doing these webinars. So, I'm Anne-Catherine, and I'm the co-founder of Nordic Laboratories and DNA Life, which is a group of companies where we are dedicated to change healthcare through functional medicine and functional medicine thinking and laboratory tests that way. So I was looking at Richard's biography, and it's seriously long. I think if I had to go through everything and explain everything, it would take the whole webinar. That is how experienced he is within this field. So, but there's a few things that I really just have to say. And that is, Richard is the maker or the godfather or whatever of organic acid testing. At least that's how I view Richard in regards to this topic. He's a really true expert when it comes to nutrition. And he is at the faculty of Bridgeport University. And he is an independent researcher who has manifested a passion for teaching others and writing books about clinical application of organic acid testing. We will put the links to his books in the emails that we are sending out. We already did for the invites, and I could see some of you had been moved on linking to those. But yeah, we will repeat those and share those links again. What the interesting thing with Richard is that he has developed, and I might use a wrong word, but I would say it's a logarithm for interpreting the amino acid testing that Nordic Labs and DNA Life also offers. And through this logarithm, he's able to turning it into a clinical recommendation so that we can make an amino acid mix specifically created on the base of the results. And that's already implemented in if you order amino acid, custom amino acid formula based on a patient's test result. I hope that was the right thing. Otherwise, Richard, you will have to correct me. Then another idea, of course, that I want with these meetings is that we become more close to each other apart. But I have a little anecdote to tell you about Richard. So I think it was back in, be careful, Richard. I think it was back in 2007, maybe. Richard arrived in Copenhagen with his beautiful wife, Gwen, and they had these two huge suitcases with them. And we were thinking, what's going on with these two suitcases? And out Gwen has made, there was one for my two sons, one for Oscar and Oliver, and there were some for some charity that Gwen was involved with when they were visiting Scandinavia. So, and one of the teddy bears, unfortunately, it has died now, but it became, it actually became the mascot of my youngest son's football team. And it had several medals around its neck. It made sure they won many medals. So thank you very much, Richard. So, but anyway, enough of this. Let's pass the stage on to Richard. I will try and, if I can, answer any questions on the side, but otherwise put the questions in and we will try and see if there's time for questions at the end. So thank you very much, Richard. Here you go.
Okie dokie. Well, hello world. I am in a new configuration here. Dear Anne-Catherine yesterday gave me some input. I asked for it on my webinar look, and she said it was a bit homey. So I've turned my desk 180 degrees. So behind me, you're looking out on the mountainside on one side of my house. And so I hope the glare is not too bad here. We're going to continue like this. How great to be with you today. Where do I begin? And Catherine has gotten me emotional about those.
Sorry.
Yeah, I'm getting all soft in my old age. No, those dolls were my wife's life. So that's a wonderful story. But I have another story for you today, very professional. So let's get into that mode now, okay? Because I have spent a good bit of my life either in the lab developing things, you know, organic acid and fatty acids and calcium, magnesium, and everything else, right? And I developed what I call an intimacy with the data. That's a bit of a claim, you know, to have. In other words, I sat and watched the data come off the instruments. In fact, I was going to tell you, we're on organic acids today. And I'll give you this little recall. I had joined organic acid and we had brought up elements. I had had long experience in doing element, both toxic and essential element testing. And so I did that first. And I think after that was fatty acids. That one is it's the most straightforward of all the profiles. We got the big, you know, 40 fatty acid profile running on GCMS. And then Andy Brawley and I were talking every day, and he owned the lab. And he said, Richard, what do you think about this organic acid stuff? They got these cool ones you can measure your vitamin status with, you know, xanthorrhinic acid and methylmalonic acid. And I said, yeah, good, let's do it. So we got in another GCMS or whatever, and we started. Now, the point I want to recall for you, it just came to me in getting ready for this. The day that I first did a successful dual derivatization, that is, I made all of the active hydrogen groups like amines and carboxylic acids, silyl esters, if you know anything about that chemistry, silyl, it makes them volatile. And then I stabilized all the ketones so that you could see all those compounds in urine. And I injected it in a mode of using a GCMS where you see everything. It's a universal detector. It's just the mass, right? And I sat there for whatever it was. That was in those days about an hour and a half runtime, I guess, and watched these thousands and thousands of peaks that came out, one after the other. Some of you may have heard about Linus Pauling's latter work, where he started delving into urine volatiles. And just in the volatiles, the one that you can measure as vapor above the urine specimen, he found thousands and thousands. So human urine is extremely complex. And all these organic acids we're going to talk about are in there, right? It's just something that you pass every day. You might, by the way, it's a good notion, a good lesson for you to think about, why do we have all these? I mean, isn't our citric acid cycle intermediates, aren't they valuable to keep? Yes. Well, why do they appear in our urine then? Well, good question. It's because there's a certain thing called the renal threshold, right? Every compound has a renal threshold above which it spills into urine. That's the answer, because citric acid, let's say, has a renal threshold, and it's in blood, and it goes to levels that can spill into urine and normally do. So therefore, the very valuable lesson is the normal ranges that a lab establishes for healthy people, quote, healthy, whatever we best define that as, come from just saying, okay, give me some urine from healthy people. And the question is, how high can you measure it and how low can you measure it? So you have this dynamic range of measurements. That's analytical stuff in the lab. Okay, so I sat at the bench for the first few years of metametrics. I say sat, I stood, sat, jumped, whatever. And we got these things developed. And the field came out of basically medical pediatricians and so forth that were doing neonatal testing. Okay, you probably know that. And so organic acids are used to do genetic disorder evaluations at birth, like PKU. That's one of the most famous ones all along time. So that's where it all came from. Now, what I'm going to do today is I'm going to shamelessly advocate my book on organic acids by using it to use the illustrations in the book. Hey, why not? I don't need to make slides again. They're right there in the book. And we're going to go through a little bit of that. And then I'm going to try to proceed in a way that you can follow along and go to what I think of, at least as far as I'm concerned, cutting edge. So I'm now still developing, improving the tools, let's say, by which you can use all these lab tests and writing books about them. All right, let's go. So first I'm going to go to the books. I've got to tap up books here. Here we go. Path to Health, Organic Acid. And this is the beginning of it. And I'm going to scroll through to page 10. Oh, by the way, at this page, if there's any question about this, you might let me know. I consider this to be very, very basic knowledge. Anyone who's done an organic acid profile surely understands this much about it, and that is what you're looking at some precursor like an amino acid, like let's say valine, you know, and it goes through a pathway of catabolism in the liver usually, in that case particularly. And at a certain point in the catabolic process, you encounter an enzyme that requires, this E is the enzyme, which requires a cofactor, which is derived from a vitamin, okay? And so if you don't have, well, and so this is the normal pathway. You go through that enzyme, you get a product, and you see what's detectable, and sometimes it may be undetectable because it's so low. So there you are. But now in many, well, I could almost without hesitation say everybody, okay? Not just many patients, it's everybody. This is really a lesson to take home. If you haven't, the question of genetics and these compounds always comes up. Good one. It should be in the forefront of your mind when you're interpreting organics, always. Because the question is, when I got my PhD at the University of Texas, and it was a hotbed of nutritional science in those days. Roger Williams was writing his books on nutritional individuality, right? And so forth. So well, just think of it this way. When you look at the needs of individuals for a nutrient like niacin, let's say, doesn't matter, B1 niacin, okay? There is a range. Some people do well at quite low levels of dietary intake, and some people need more to do really well, right? And some people need a little more. Why? Why are we all exactly the same? Well, because we're genetically different. And that means these things, these E's right here, this E is a protein, by the way. These are fundamentals, but you really need this. It's a protein made up of amino acids, okay? And it's genetically determined. And so if your genes are different, which they are, then your enzymes will be different. And they will have different cofactor bindings, and therefore you'll have different needs for the vitamin, like niacin, and that's NAD, and so forth. Okay, and over here, this is if that step is blocked, then you notice this biomarker thing gets bigger than that one, because the compound preceding that step doesn't get cleared as well. And so it builds up to higher levels. And those levels generally then manifest into the blood, and the blood travels to the kidney, where there's a renal threshold above which it spills into urine. And so it goes high. That's the whole story, you see. All right, let's move on. And this is by what's showing, but here you have the cofactor. See the big blue X is on the cofactor. Here it's on the enzyme. So this would be like a dietary thing, a nutritional factor. Okay, you have a horrible diet. You just eat, popcorn and beer and lollipops or something, whatever, right? And you don't get the vitamin. Okay, then you get these deficiency disorders. And this is one way you can detect it. But that's just one way. The other one that's more generally prevalent, actually, people still don't quite get this. That's why I'm emphasizing, okay? It's the enzyme because of your genes. You just didn't get a really good enzyme for that particular pathway. And so that means that you have a slow process. So you get this compound high in urine. Now you may correct that by giving the vitamin that makes the cofactor, or not. Why wouldn't you? Well, because the enzyme may not bind it very well. And no matter how high you pump the vitamin, these huge, hyper, what do you call you call that process when you get into the super physiological levels, really big, like, 100 grams of vitamin C or something that big, all right? So even no matter how you go, sometimes you can only get partial correction, but sometimes you get famously great corrections. So that's it. Now, that wasn't part of my plan, but you got it anyway. I'm just pointing out here how in this book, I decided to include these navigation tables. So here's one you can navigate by clinical conditions. So fatigue, like anemia associated, it might be folate or B12 or copper. And all three of those have organic acids that are markers. And you can tap through. The copper is the HVA, hemovanillic acid to vanilla mandelic acid ratio. It goes high in copper deficiency. It's quite sensitive actually to copper deficiency. So there you are, that's that table. And then nutrient deficiencies. So here are the nutrients. I started out with Well, this is adenosine, cobalamin B12, arginine, and there's the organic acids are here. You can just tap and click through to them, you see, so you can navigate like that. All the way down to thiamine, because it's T, it's alphabetical. And then here, just an alphabetical list of the biomarkers. Starts with the numerical ones, because that's just the way things sort, when you do a simple sort. And that's the way I left it. And then the alphas and betas and so forth. So that's the navigation tables. Now, the matter of being high or low, I've already talked about that somewhat, but I need to go more into it. And I'm going to do something else here. I want to move this window over a bit and pull up another one. This is a PDF of a laboratory report. And there it is. So let's see. I can't quite see it I've got to move this meeting stuff over a bit. I'm trying to do that right now. Uh-oh, I didn't get it to go. There it goes, okay. I'm putting it over on the side of my screen rather than the top. Now, I can see this, and I want you to watch. And so this is a simple, it's a Genova report. And by the way, most of my writing, even now, even though I'm not associated with the lab at all, and haven't been for, 5 or 6 years, so I'm completely independent and sort of retired, trying to be sometimes. But this is, I know these because I helped develop these, not like I said, at the bench. I brought it up, and then have a lot of refinements by other great people at the lab. And then I was involved in designing this report. And so I like it. But it's not that it's the only one we could use at all. Okay, so that's what it is. But I want to point out some things you may or may not have paid much attention to. These numbers, 6.2, less than or equal to 11, or down here, 601, 56 to 987. You see, I'm there. And in fact, let me do something real quick, if you excuse me. I want to go to my system preferences, get a bigger pointer to make sure you can follow and see it. The point here is the information contained within these reports that you many times don't pay any attention to. I need, on this thing, not displayed. What's the one where you do accessibility? That's it. And come on, old Mac. Respond, please. We're getting there. Okay, so here we go. And display now. And cursor. Okay, good. I should have done this beforehand. I'm sorry, I didn't get it done. Now I have a nice big old fat cursor. You can see maybe better. So let's just take citrate. So the result up here, by the way, in what units? It says micrograms per milligram creatinine. So we normalize by creatinine. Why? Think of it this way. You do a test on a patient 2 days apart. Let's say, like in a study I helped conduct, every 2 weeks in a row, you say collect on Monday evening. He said, okay, fine. So you bring in a specimen. 1 week where he got very busy, was quite active outside all day, and drank a 6-pack of beer before going to bed. Let's just say, or a couple of bottles, whatever. And the next week, he was not so active and kind of was just didn't have much fluid intake at all, okay? In the evening particularly. And so you're gonna have now, let's say nothing else changed. What's happening now when he had that large consumption of ale, he diluted his urine. And so all the levels that you read off the instrument are way lower. But he's the same person. He has the same lean body mass, et cetera. And of course, creatinine in urine is directly a reflection of lean body mass, okay? So you divide by that and you get the same numbers. That's what we want, good. So that's the reason we normalize to creatinine, is what we call that, okay? All right, so it's for citrate, 284 micrograms per milligram creatinine, good. And this says, has to do with what we call the central 95th percentile. So it's 50 to 987, central because at the low end of, if you can measure every person that comes in the urine that comes in the lab, then you can measure down to the 2.5 percentile and up to the 97.5 percentile. So that middle part is the central 95th percentile. So those values let you know when the patient's outside of the upper 2.5 percentile, which is the overall 97.5, or the lower 2.5 percentile. That's going to come up again. And then this 601, this report was designed to display quintiles at the top here. You see, I'm pointing up here now. And quintile distribution, that says right there. I can't quite select it, but anyway, you see it. And of course, when you have any population divided into quintiles, then everyone, no matter how small or how large, falls into the first, second, third, fourth, and fifth quintiles. That's 100%. All right. So 3.9, or digest 601, it's the 80th percentile, or it's the cutoff to the fifth quintile, or the 8th decile, which I'm going to define again. All right. So that's that part. Now, it doesn't matter if you're high or low. I'm going to go to this one, and I'm going to show you. This is the kind of, I'm jumping a little bit ahead here, but that's all right. We'll catch up with myself. I'm simply talking about these reference range bins or categories. And notice that here I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's the deciles. And then for the first decile, I've subdivided it into a cutoff at this point between the yellow and green, where you drop into the first decile from the second decile, and this is, of course, the middle, sort of normal part, the fat part of the normal range, you could say. Okay, well, if you just drop into the first decile, you're in this yellow. But if you drop below the 2.5 percentile, you're in this pink, you're very low. Okay, that's abnormal. Now, so what? Let's go back to citrate. So what if your citrate is low? That's good, because that means you don't have Q10 deficiency, et cetera, right? It could be some B complex, could be Q10 most of the time, or a couple of other things, actually. Okay, and so if it's not high, we're happy. Well, wait a minute, why? Here's the way I put it. Is citrate a normal human metabolite? Yes. Okay, then if you are below 97.5% of the people in the world, let's say, because we're worldly group today, not just my country or yours, right? You're abnormal. Now, clinically, do you care? Well, what I'm saying, and then this is where I'm building my case here, that we ought to be aware, or at least, maybe it means something to be all that low. Now, beyond that, let me ask you this. What if you get a report? If you've done a lot of these, you probably almost certainly have. But almost everything that's on this page, which is like the first couple of pages maybe of some of those layouts, depending, is in the first, either the 2.5 or the first, or say below the third decile down in here. And a bunch of them are very low, 2.5 percentile, all the way down the page. But does that add up to anything? I'm going to say yes today. By the way, while I'm on this, next thing to get in this order, that the high end is done similarly. So in this, when you go from this yellow to pink, you're in the 10th decile, you see? But then if you go above the 95th, you're in this dark pink decile. And then I also add, what if you're 2 times the 95th percentile, then you're up here. And you see on this report, a bunch of times they were. Now this is a longitudinal report. So if you've learned your organic acids, that's the basics, you have some idea that adipate, subrate, and ethyl malonate are related to like carnitine status, okay, and mitochondrial fatty acid oxidation. And if they're high, you can give carnitine, and many times people get better, sometimes way better, just from carnitine. And riboflavin is the support nutrient that goes along with it, okay? So if you're very high for those, then that's what you see. Well, what if you see, I'll give you an example that just came up. Well, this actually pertains, it'll pertain here, but also in amino acids. Let me just hold off on that. Sometimes you'll see extremely high adipate and subrate. Let's just say that, both of them. And this report would tell you immediately if it's extremely high, because it would be in this red category. Why do you care? Here's why. If you have just a simple, let's say, a regular genetic little polymorphism, like we all do, that I was talking about, you're likely to have some of these things up in the 10th decile, 10th decile, or the 5th quintile at least, right? Well, that's a little bit high, and that means maybe you would benefit from carnitine riboflavin, even if you're just there. But if you're above 2 times the 97.5 percentile, it's almost for sure you don't have just a dietary little mild problem. You have a very significant genetic abnormality, which means what? It means when you as a clinician intervene, you may have to use quite famously high levels, not just what it would be for you had milligrams of carnitine, but grams of carnitine or something like that, way higher, maybe to achieve the correction. Okay, that's why you want to know, is it just a little high or is it way high? It's the reason for this report. And is it low, very low, and what if a bunch of them are? I'm going to leave this longitudinal now. Just the explanation is, this is a case where I've got a little sticky note that says the intervals on year were 0.6, 0.8, and 1.0. That is, the first test was the baseline. The second test was 6 months later, 0.6 of, or 7 months, 0.6 of a year. The third one was another half a year or so, 0.8 actually interval. And then the fourth one was a year after that. And so there's 4 results for alpha-ketoglutarate, okay, over a period of about 2 years. 4 independently done profiles, you follow me? And does this let you see anything new? It should. Have you ever before been, well, maybe you've sometimes stretched out 4 of these profiles, which have like 3 or 4 pages each on your desk, and try to go back and forth and figure out what's changed and how, and which direction and so forth. Well, at a glance on this report, you can see all that stuff. It's really cool. And by the way, while I'm on this, let me take it, I was going to go to this next anyway. Let's talk about alpha-ketoglutarate. Well, over the years since I left the lab, I retired from the lab, I've continued to research and so forth. And as I've taught, I've realized, well, I came across evidence that just kind of bowled me over, wow, about alpha-ketoglutarate. It has to do with this matter I told you, how things spill into urine, into kidney. Well, you know, the kidney has a bunch of functions. It's very important, critical, of course, life-critical functions it has to carry out. One of those is it has to respond to systemic pH and try to adjust so that the systemic pH does not just go off the scale and so forth. One of the ways it does that is by excretion of alpha-ketoglutarate specifically. And it goes like this. As your systemic pH goes down, lower and lower and lower pH, in other words, you eat a fairly high protein diet that leaves a bunch of acids behind, like organic acids, and you have low pH. That's very common. Ketoglutarate goes down, 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 down. And as you become alkalotic, and it could be clinically if you want to go to respiratory alkalosis, you know, okay. But more commonly, just a person who's vegan and eating their fruits and veggies constantly, and that's almost all they eat. That's an alkalinizing diet. The alpha-ketoglutarate goes up, 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 up. And it's a linear response. And that's in the literature, in the new book described and cited and so forth. So alpha-ketoglutarate, we must realize, is different from the rest of, notice it's not down here on my new report, okay? And for this reason, although it sometimes can, in certain genetic situations, can move along with these, where you have blockages like in the electron transport systems in the mitochondria. Everything goes haywire, right? Goes up and down. But more commonly, you see alpha-ketoglutarate varying because of alkalosis and acidosis. Now, what happened here? Started out rather alkalotic. With intervention, remember, this is an actual case. I got to make sure I don't scroll down because I didn't get it redacted. But anyway, started kind of nicely alkalotic, you could say, nothing wrong with that. And then after the second test, the intervention done there, I think that this happened to be free-form amino acids, caused a profound shifting down by 8 deciles. That's a big shift. And then after another year went by, the values moved back into the alkalotic range. So you're seeing very dramatically the effect of your intervention. Ain't that cool? I'm going to leave that one for now. And let's see what's in my, I've talked about biological variability. Let's see, page 15, I think in this book, but that's it right there, part of it. Yeah. here's biological variabilities. And this is CVT, that's total variability. CVA is analytical and CVB is biological. And they're sorted, you see, from the low to the high. What does that mean? Here's how the experiment was done. We took a group of people, a good sized group of something like 30, 40 people, something like that, and said, okay, we want to get specimens every week, the same night, the same day, or overnight collection. And so we did that for 8 weeks and told them just continue to do what you normally do in your diet and lifestyle, and try not to do something, greatly different on a given Monday, because it was a Monday evening collection, brought it in on Tuesday. And over 8 weeks, then we took the data and we evaluated the biological variability. In other words, how reliable is the reading? People have asked me that how many times. If I do a test on a patient, I get a single urine specimen. How do I know it's going to be the same if I did it the next day or next week? Good question. So we got an answer for it. And this was published. Let's first of all just finish here. They went as for picolinic acid, that was the lowest one. That's kind of, you might be a little surprised. That's a brain product right there. 12.3 was the percentage CVB. And by the way, see this report over here. Here's this decile stuff again. This is just a single report there. And so 12, that's like 1.2 deciles. I try to think, personally, I think, and I encourage you to think in deciles. If you can get a decile display, and if you can't, on the quintile display, you can still see these little, within the quintiles, the little markers are positioned differently. Okay, what does that mean? Let's go picolinic acid is really near this down at the bottom. Okay, here's a value. It's in the low range, it's in the first decile, not the 2.5 percentile, that's low. And quinolinate is very high. Okay, that's very bizarre, by the way, that result. I won't talk about that right now. What I'm telling you is, if you did this same patient week after week after week, and nothing particularly changed in his status and so forth, his day just kept on going, you are going to find the numbers are going to vary right within that decile, 1 decile range up or down. That's really good for you to know. Go to the extreme other end, fumarate. What does that mean? Well, first of all, you see this little notation right in there, that little dash, 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 and X. That means it's less than detection limit. Where's the detection limit? That's what this shows you. It's right there at the division between the 3rd and 4th decile. That's it. And so it's too low to detect. And so I just put the mark as much as I can in the middle of that. It's somewhere in there. We don't know where. All right. Now, the thing about fumarate is, for whatever reason, I won't try to go into that. I couldn't discuss it very intelligently anyway, in terms of why is it has such a variability. It's simply that, the obvious is that it is not one highly regulated within the hepatocytes and so forth, all right? And so that means the next week you might read, this is 7.4 deciles. It could be up here. And then nothing changed in the patient. It's just variability week by week by week. Okay, so you have big differences. That lets you know how much clinical weight do you place on an abnormality. That's basically it. And if you can refer to this table, I think eventually, if I were still dividing reports going out daily, I would try to factor this in. And you would, particularly when you get to the interpretative stage, you would say, let's say this one maybe is quite within a couple of deciles. So that value is good. This one being extremely low, maybe it has a pretty mid-range variability. So I think you could say this one is almost certainly low. Exactly how low, we can't say there. Well, picolinic acid, we can say it's low, and we know that's where it would be week by week, right there. And I'm telling you, for that particular compound, it repeats very nicely. Now, I'm going to do something here to illustrate what you can do with these new books and to take you to some relevant specific data. So you see right here, this is a discussion going along the text, and it's got a citation. This one happens to be some guy named Lord, 2012. And all you got to do is tap there, and then I have to say this here, I think, and if you have it on an iPad or something, it just immediately opens. What's going to happen is, in my browser, it's going to open that report, and we can read it. So you can go to the horse's mouth, so to speak. That's what this lets you do, the research, and what did they actually say about this matter? And here it is right here. Let's see, I think this, lets me tap through the PDF, does it? Yes, right here. And I want to quickly show you some of the details of this data. This looks good, full screen. Okay, so this is the report that we put together based on the experiment I just described to you. And that table is that's not it. These are all the analytical things. And there's the table, a little more expanded than you just saw. And here's the data. So I just want you to see a little bit about this. And so here is lactic acid, and here's quinolinic acid. You notice the variability. Now, each one of these bars is a subject, an individual, and there are 8 dots for each one. That's 8 weeks. And you see the variability every week. There it is. That's the raw data from this experiment. And so, and by the way, notice so overall, the variability is kind of like it is in the middle here, you could say, when we did that table. But notice there's a further detail here. It depends on the level. At low levels, you have much less variability than at high levels. To a degree, that's just an analytical thing that analytical chemists always say. Well, of course, you almost always have that. You get into, because you can so accurately measure, well, if you can accurately measure at the low level, which you can for lactic acid, then the variability tends to be lower. Now, also, sometimes I'd be careful here. There's analytical variability that to some degree explains that. But more the point of this study was the biological variability goes way down. In other words, you're not spilling very much lactic acid in urine on the first week. And look at this one, how tight it is. The first week, second week, third week, fourth week, fifth week. See, they're all almost the exact same values. That's how close it is. Now, as you go high, once again, there's the analytical thing kicks in and the physiological thing. Think of it this way. The higher the more abnormal your lactic acid is, then you're in a metastable metabolic situation. And that means that the likelihood of it being not so high, let's take this highest value here, is so high, the likelihood of it being that high week by week by week is very low. And if it were, you would be in serious trouble. It would be like a life-threatening lactic acidosis, probably. You see, so you can't stay that high. Your body knows that. It knows how to fix it. So it does. It puts in place all kinds of correction and yanks it back down and goes relatively low compared to. So anyway, that's just the way the data looks. This one, again, I got this feeling of intimacy with the data. You know what I mean? And you can get some of that too, and it will really enhance your ability to read these reports. All right. What's my next point here? Report layout, I've already talked about that. Yeah, and compared to, basically this is it. And I'm just talking here about all these points about it, and it expands. This is a multi-frame figure, so you can tap through it by tapping down here, I think. Yeah, there you go. So it just zooms in for you like that in this case. And you've already seen that other Genova report where you see the difference between how the ranges and the data are represented. Covered all that. And we're moving, as usual, when I lecture, I don't stay exactly according to my script, and if I'm getting through to you, and I hope we're going to have time for some questions too. We got a ways to go. I've talked about alpha KG, and can I pull it back up? Yes, I can go back to the PDF viewer, I think. No, it's in Safari. There, I think it might be right in, no, it's not. Yeah, there was a separate publication. I'm just going to describe this without trying to illustrate it like that. And this will be the final upgrade I'll give you on specific analytes. And so here I'm talking about, it's not shown. Wait a minute, there's another page here. Let's see if I can do this properly and try to get past the, there you go. Okay, good. It has to do with this pyroglutamate, okay? Really cool marker. But in this biological variability study, in the original paper that I was just showing you, pyroglutamate was not included. And the reason is because it was such bizarre behavior. And the behavior looked like, I'll describe it like this. There was a group of people that had extreme excursions week by week of pyroglutamate, very high, and then boom, low, and then coming up and down and so forth. And I looked closely at those and pulled them out, and in the follow-up paper that's cited in the book, and you can go look at it. I put the people who do not have that kind of excursions, variability, in one that do have it. The first thing I noticed when I looked at the set, and there were like, I don't know, 15 people, something like that had these really big excursions. And I said, what about gender? Almost, I think all of them but one was female. The one who was not female turned out to be one of the lab employees, great guy, but he was a very heavy smoker, multiple packs per day. And, and you can't, it's one of these people you wouldn't listen when you talk, hey, you need to cut that stuff. Yeah, I know. He never did. He got lung cancer, and about 4 years later, he died of lung cancer. So that was his story. Otherwise, it was all female. So he had aberrations of a different type. They have just what? Menses, right? I mean, what differentiate them? I did a lot of digging and wrote this follow-up paper and found the multiple pieces of evidence that, in fact, estrogen confers a very strong oxidative stress. So every time when your estrogen, every month your estrogen goes whoop like that at a certain, triad and so forth, period, then you are under stress, oxidative stress. What does that mean? What's the main antioxidant in the human body that responds to oxidative stress? The answer, glutathione. Okay, so you deplete your glutathione once a month. You deplete it really largely. That's a separate discussion, by the way, about specimen collection from women. Maybe you shouldn't do it during those times because pyroglutamate's likely to be really high. Okay. So it turns out that the other people in the other group had much, much more stable pyroglutamate. And in this follow-up paper, I proposed that the reference range go to that other report. Is it here? Yes, right here. On pyroglutamate, go down. There it is generally too high, and the high range particularly way too high for normal. I propose, I think, 15 to 40 instead of 28 to 88. Again, that's just my late career contribution to the field, trying to hone in and correct, you could say, the report I developed at Metametrics, or not by myself, of course. I don't take full credit for these things at all, but I was there helping to do this whole development. And I came up, or helped come up with these numbers. Okay, but they're just a bit high when you take into account that aberration. So that's it. So that's your update in terms of interpreting individual analytes. Moving on now. Yeah. Page 58 here. Let's see if I can navigate there quickly. Yeah, this is in this section of this book. Let me kind of see them if you can read that. Down here we have biomarker patterns, adaptive and compensatory responses. That may be a little too far. We'll try that. Yeah, that's 78. Okay, back one time to the end of that section. Well, let me I'll go to the beginning of it. Is it 58? By the way, I'm going to make these notes as sketchy as they are, because I don't have a full set of slides for you folks available to Ann Catherine, and she can. Oh, sorry. I'll turn my phone completely off right now if I can. That's what we call an Amber Alert. It generally means a child has been stolen, and they put out the vehicle and say, everybody look for it and let us know. They call your police station and see. Let me do that. This, I think. Okay. That's got that taken care of. This is the chapter where I go into various patterns like the lactate pyruvate ratio, There was a pre-seminar question about that one. Notice my light, perfected my lighting here. Yes, if it goes very high, someone asked about that. That's a sign of reductive stress. You know what reductive stress is? What condition, in what condition that you all know a lot about, does reductive stress become a common feature? Answer, diabetes. Why? Because in diabetes, you can't burn glucose, right? Because it can't get into the cells. So what happens is the cells say, okay, let's burn fatty acids. It's like the Panama Canal. When you start burning fatty acids, you got to open the gate and let the water come in, right? That's letting the fatty acids come in. But then when you do that, and the cell says, oh, we got a little too much ATP. Well, you can't have too much ATP, but that's the thing. It said, what? You've got too much shut down. I'm sorry, the lock on the Panama Canal is still filling. So what happens is the acetyl-CoA that's being generated from all those fatty acid oxidation has to go somewhere else. It can't go into the citric acid cycle, or you'll overburn the cell and blow it out. Where does it go? Ketone. It goes into, yeah, we call them ketone bodies, right? Exactly. Beta hydroxybutyrate and acetone and so on, right? That's reductive stress. Reductive stress causes shifts. The lactate pyruvate that's an equilibrium. It's a dynamic equilibrium going back and forth. You can go one way or the other. It's NADH in NAD, right? As you get an abundance of NADH, that's reductive stress. And it tends to push you over to lactate and make it too high relative to pyruvate. So high lactate to pyruvate, and those are the ratios, what I'm talking about here. And by the way, you can look up these citations, click through on the book, and follow that a little bit. Here's the copper deficiency. So these are just individual patterns, glutathione capacity erosion. Capacity erosion. I've worked on that terminology a while. I really love that topic because you can read that in these reports. Elevated benzoate and 2-methyl-hyprate glycine conjugation deficit, and it goes beyond that because elevated benzoate, or not normal, subnormal benzoate, is obesity, obesogenic, let's say. All right, I'm just going to move into this, adaptive and compensatory states. Now let's see, because I'm going to run out of time, of course. Let's see if I can just put this in a nutshell for you. If you get a report that has a bunch of those low levels, so let's say the whole first page, citric acid cycle, the carnitine markers, the keto acids, low. In the past, when I saw those, I'd say, doctor, I don't know, it's like this patient is extremely efficient. You know, they don't have any deficiencies. In fact, their reactions are just working so smoothly, they don't even excrete these things. That doesn't really, and at the time I thought, well, that's all I can tell you about it. Let's move on. They say, okay, move on. But I never felt good about it. So there's a new story. Let's see if I can find, get to it here. Yes, well, sort of in here, I'm getting hypometabolic states. So these are what I term, now I'll give you the full big old multi-syllable phrase. Individuals, and here's the best thumbnail. Individuals, your patients, who become chronically insufficient in key mitochondrial nutrients or factors, let's just say factors, like oxygen. Is that a key to mitochondria? I guess, right? That would be hypoxia. Well, yes, you can have clinical hypoxia, but you can have also just, I call it couch potato hypoxia. Patients just never do anything actively. They're just barely breathing. That's all they need. It's a type of mild hypoxia. Just leave that there. How about magnesium? You ever have magnesium deficient patient? Yes, of course, everybody does. How about CoQ10? Yes. So all those factors are described here. But if you're chronically in those states, one of my favorites is tryptophan, or just say essential amino acids. And tryptophan particularly, why? Because how many people are depressed? A lot. How many people that are depressed are diagnosed that way or put on SSRI medications? Most of them, in the US anyway. I don't know about, France or whatever, right? Probably about the same though. So what? Well, so the SSRIs block the reuptake of serotonin, right? Yes, that's why the serotonin stays higher in the synapse. Yes, but when it's in the longer it's in the synapse, the more likely it's going to get broken down by the monoamine oxidase, which means it leaves the nerve as 5-hydroxyindoleacetate, which is an organic acid you measure in its profile. And what happens in the first year or so on SSRIs typically is that the 5-HIAA levels in urine go way up. I mean, way up, twice normal, twice the 95th percentile maybe. That's how, or in that range of the 95th percentile at least. Okay, what does that mean? It means you're blowing through your tryptophan just to try to sustain the synaptic levels of serotonin because it's being destroyed, you see, because of the drug. You know, okay, well, what if you don't add tryptophan? Then you go and lower tryptophan. And that means you can't even make proteins because that's required for almost every protein in the human body. And so that, and several other, almost all, you could say, the essential amino acids, as their levels are restricted, you go into a hypometabolic state. Now, why do you, well, let's just take CoQ10. Let's say you're chronically CoQ10 deficient, maybe, and magnesium, not uncommon. Why would the body do that and go into this thing? And the full term, by the way, is, let me go back to that. The full term is hypometabolic mitochondrially retracted compensatory states. Mitochondrially retracted. What's that? That means you have less mitochondria per cell in your liver, muscles, and so forth. Okay? Less mitochondria. Yes, and these data on figure 6.4 right here are all about that. These are mitochondrial fusion protein disorders, which means sometimes these fusion proteins are abnormal. And that has to do with how many mitochondria you have. So there's lots of evidence saying that, in fact, this mitochondrial plasticity is real. Okay, the reason that your cells do this thing, that big term, is because magnesium and CoQ10 are not there, and you're pushing glucose, fatty acids, amino acids through all those oxidative pathways, and at the end of it, you know, they all go to the same place. It's called an electron pair, right? A reducing equivalent on NADH, FADH. It has to get onto oxygen, right? And to do that, it has to enter into the electron transport system, where A, CoQ10 has to be there in order to shuttle the electrons, and B, magnesium ADP has to be there to receive the phosphate. If they're not, nothing happens. Nothing happens, right? And so what then? Well, then the signals get sent back up above, you know, to the big regulators. Say, hey, things are getting bogging down out here. We can't have this. And by the way, the cell will die if you don't do something. It will just oxidize itself to death and reduce itself, whatever. So there's a very rapid response where the cells start to shut down mitochondriogenesis. That means the levels get less and less to keep you alive, to spare your tissue destruction from oxidative stress and reductive stress, both of which happen off and on in cyclic manners and so forth. That's why. So we know these hypometabolic and many times, not necessarily, but many times, mitochondrially retracted metabolic states occur. And what I'm saying is you can see that in the organic acid profile by these pages with this low stuff. See, that's hypometabolic. What do you do? Let's go to that and we'll have some time for questions maybe. Let's see, here I need to navigate again. And here. All right. Free form amino acid, FFAA, that abbreviation is used in the book a lot. So there's your definition. And here's a summary of hypometabolic states like diagnosis, organic acid profile patterns of multiple levels below the second quintile. All right. Common symptoms, chronic pain, fatigue, refractory depression, obesity, neurodevelopmental disorders. Some autistic children have this thing going on. Clinicals of major depression, chronic fatigue syndrome, autism spectrum disorders, hypochlorhydria, aging. I mean, this is a lot of stuff, right? A lot of people. Etiologies, chronic deficiency, oxygen, magnesium, iron, methionine, cysteine, that's iron, sulfur clusters, there's a whole bunch of evidence about that in the book. CoQ10, folates, carnitine. Interventions. 1, micronutrients, see above, as indicated. In other words, where it said folates, well, what if your fig glue is very high? Everything else is low, but fig glue is high. And in this case, by the way, it almost redefines high, because even high normal when everything else is low becomes suspiciously suggesting folate is needed. So you would add, let's say you add folates, great, you had 5-methyl DHF or folinic acid, whatever, and 2, free-form amino acids, 0.1 to 0.2 gram per kilogram BID before meals. That's about 5 to 7 or 8 grams of free-form amino acids before meals. Breakfast and dinner twice a day. It's what I call the push-push hypothesis. What does that do? Let's see if I can scroll forward a little bit and hit on that. There's a case I was going, well, here, this is a woman, overweight, and the clinician, when I talked to him, said, is this hormonal? She thinks it might be, or they may be the clinician. She has anxiety and depression, sugar cravings, history of severe alcoholism. That's another sign right there, of course, of imbalance in metabolic. Hypothyroid syndrome, I love that. And I have a whole story someday we can talk about, maybe, of how many hypothyroid patients treated with thyroid hormone don't need it. What they need is mitochondrial function, because that's what thyroid hormone is doing. It's trying to let your energetic system be balanced. But if you're wiping out your mitochondria, it's awfully tough to do that. You see, so it's not, the thyroid hormone may cause some symptom relief, but it's not the underlying problem if you have this hypometabolic state. All right, on drugs, intervention, multivitamins, and free-form amino acids. She got way better. This clinician said, I couldn't believe. And here you are, low, 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 low. You see, that's it. And again, on the genomic reports, you have a little more trouble because they don't point these out. They don't say, they don't put a big old purple XL there, like I do on my thing. And by the way, we might be able to make these available through Nordic in the future. I don't know, it's another discussion. But so it's the next page, you see multiple lows. All right, that's the story there. And, oh yeah, I've got to get on to case illustrations. Where's, I need to talk about mTOR. Maybe I should just talk about it. Why not? Let me just pull this down, in fact, and just look at the camera. Oh goodness, go away. Go down that way and now down that way. Okay, and this one, well, I'll leave that one there. We might want to talk about some of that. All right, so mTOR, what is it? You probably heard about it. You may be a specialist in it and can teach me. I don't know. I started learning about it a few years back only. And it is a master regulator. It has the ability to sense half a dozen or so nutrients, especially the cellular levels of amino acids. What's the big deal there? Well, how are you going to make new tissue, which is what mTOR stimulates, if you don't have amino acid? Well, you can't. Okay. If you give these free forms twice a day, it's a little push because they go to quite high levels, but only for about 45 minutes. They come back to normal. Pushing twice a day. Push breakfast, push dinner. Next day, push. It's a push twice a day on mTOR. And what happens is mTOR says, oh, it looks like we're going to be able to make some new tissues. And so it does like a triage, whole body triage. Where's your problem? Maybe it's the gut. You've got thin gut lining, the villus structure, only about half what they should be. How do you diagnose that? I'd be glad to hear that answer from somebody. I don't think there is a way. Now, you know, if it's celiac disease and they're flat, okay, I'm talking about half or 1/3. That's definitely not good, but that's a tissue deterioration. And you can't reverse that without mTOR telling the body to do that. And free-form amino acids stimulate mTOR to do just that. And so you see all these disparate conditions, depression, anxiety, obesity, etc., correcting, and I mean massively correcting. I did want to do one final thing, and maybe I can quickly look at it. And Catherine maybe we could give me a couple of questions while I'm pulling this up. I'm looking now.
I just had to unmute myself, sorry. So one question was for women, when they do organic acid testing and they collect the urine sample, when would you suggest that they do the collection in their cycle?
Okay. Well, let me just take the evidence I brought up earlier and sort of state the obvious, if I may, and that is when they're not in the maximum estrogen secretion stage, okay?
So after bleeding, but before ovulation?
Yes, don't collect the sample there, because that's the maximal, but between the point where the estrogen goes high and the beginning of the next cycle. You don't want to test in there because that's when you got the stress pushing the glutamate high, driving your glutathione low. Yeah, that's the best answer I can give there.
Another question came up. Why would a person be low in carnitine?
Oh, well, I must say, read the new book because that's elaborated in there. In fact, in the new book throughout, I have put a lot of effort into going into, there's no chapter on genomics. The genomics are everywhere. Every analyte that I describe, and it's like the old book, you know, the laboratory evaluation book, that it's analyte by analyte, and so, or biomarker by biomarker. For every one, I say, okay, now let's talk about genetics. And I put the disorder, the name, a link, and the link many times is to the online Mendelian database and so forth. You can drill right through and see multiple versions of that genetic disorder. So, carnitine. So carnitine has a complex biochemical pathway that requires, by the way, single carbons, methyl groups, and other cofactors. And any of them that are lacking, and by the way, I have a little pathway showing that, and a number, I think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 genetic points that impact carnitine formation within your body. By the way, in this new book, you're looking now, what's on the screen is the big book, the big baby. I've been working on this thing for like 5 years because it's, you know, the old one is no longer available at all. And the publisher has no interest in ever making it available that I can detect. And I've attempted to find out. And they don't even go talk about it. So, okay, so I can't let it just die because I teach with it at the University of Bridgeport and everywhere else I teach, right? And a bunch of other schools teach with it. So I've redone it. This is the new version. This is in chapter 11. And I just recently developed this case study to illustrate through the whole, what I call the Genova ion profile. That's everything sort of. It's amino acids and fatty acids and organic acids and elements and vitamins and all in one big profile. That's what this is. And rather than my longitudinal, I said, okay, let's say you don't have that. And I put the Genova report side by side before and after. And it was just a fantastic response. This, just to summarize this one, and I won't go through all these details. You can see that in the book. Go to the last slide because it was a 47-year-old woman, several years of severe depression and anxiousness, on disability for the last year, seeing a psychiatrist 4 times a week. Okay, and the last slide I can tap straight through here. I'm reading here, following the start of free-flow amino acid therapy, the patient reported numerous signs of improved function, including no need to continue psychiatric evaluations. That's pretty nice. And you can see it in all different aspects of all these profiles within the great profile that's everything, you know, without everything, but it's most of the nutrient markers that you can dream of. Okay. When the clinician realized the potential for fatty acid synthase deficiency, you had to read the case to see that. Therapeutic nutrients for a genetic defect of the fatty acid synthase enzyme. And this is according to published protocols in this book, right? Daily does, get this, thiamine 300 milligrams, riboflavin 400, biotin 8 milligrams, carnitine 5,000 milligrams liquid, and SAMe 400 milligrams. Due to the glycine cleavage issue in this data that I tell you about if you read through it. After only 7 days on this therapy, the patient, now this is what I just couldn't resist putting this in the book. Look at this, 7 days, and then what? Reported not only not being psychotic anymore, waking up happy. I won't cry. How can you not love it? Folks, you see the potential. What we can learn, and I'm telling you, I love to tell this story. I'm going to try to get through it this time. It's like you're standing on the bow of the boat, and you know somebody slapped me. But the movie that with the guy and the girl is standing out on the bow, and you look and see this wave going by, the bow wave, right? You're on the bow. You folks are on the bow. Look, and you'll see your effect streaming out to how many people in the future, you see, with this kind of power. What I say, I assert, as I did in the beginning, this kind of thing that is looking for the metabolic issues in every human being and trying to satisfy them. That's all you're doing. And that's all this test does for you, help you find them. When you do, and you satisfy them in the ways that we've been smart enough to figure out, partly at least, these people get not just don't need the drug anymore, they have fullness of life. At least, you know, I mean, compared to that description, it's kind of hard to beat it, right? Happy for the first time in her memory, right? Okay. So that's really what it's all about. And I think, did I answer the question again, Catherine?
You know what, I got blown away with this story and your emotions and how you change people, change their life. I just got all, I don't even know if you answered the question. So
yeah,
let me just,
I understand.
There's a few questions coming up in the end here. No, I think this is it, Richard. I think you have said what you could. At 271 people watching live. This is a big tribe we have got going here. It's amazing. And
great.
Thank you, Richard. And I know they will all go in and check out your books because it is mind-blowing what you have done, and it is new thinking within our field. It gives us new tools to work with when we sit with our patients. And to me, it was just really what I needed. I've been working with the organics test for 15 years on children, adults, what have you. And yeah, this just really hit me the right place. I needed more of this education. I'm so pleased to share.
Good for you.
So
I love to talk to people.
Would you like to say a final word to the last people who are still hanging on here?
Well, I would just say
226 are still hanging on.
I'll say, put it this way, a little cliche sort of thing that I like, you know, when you got into this, well, there's a couple of cliches. One is when you looked at this, it looked complicated. And in general, when you find a new field you're going to enter and it looks complicated, actually, it's way more complicated than it looks. Okay. Here's the other thing, though. If well, certainly take Anne Catherine and wherever you are on that scale of learning this stuff, you're already way ahead of most people. And so I'm telling you this is valuable, but I'm not telling you it's easy. That's the other cliche, right? You can do it, but it's not that it's easy. But that's why I'm compelled to develop these books. The big new book, by the way, will be out in the next, I think, within 90 days, available on both Amazon and Apple, I'm intending. So the thing is, you are already doing these things. You know the power of it if you've done organic acids. And then you can link it into these other things, the other kind of profiles like the amino acids and fatty acids and all that. The more you do, I'll give you this little admonition too, the more you will find you are discovering genetic issues. It's pretty rare if you do the full profile that has all the different components in it. It's rare not to see at least one genetic issue. And the one I keyed up one we don't have time for, that has in one patient 4 clearly indicated genetic enzyme deficiencies, 4. And so you just have to begin at one of them that seems the most important and proceed on. So these things, this field is going to be evolving for a long time, but you are on the path to discovering a lot of exciting stuff.
Thank you very much. So thank you everyone for listening. I will send out as soon as I can a recording of this webinar as well with the link to the books, which you can get in Apple bookstore. not Amazon, but I will send link. And if you can't wait for me to send a mail tomorrow, then go in and look at the invitations that were sent out the last week, but because there are links in there as well. So you know now what to do already now when you shut down the Zoom link now. So just a reminder, next week, same time, same place, for interpretation and discussion about GI map testing. So hang on, we will send out invites for that, and yeah, we will carry on asking talented people to help everybody to educate themselves better, so that when we have a full clinic again, we are completely ready to rock. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much. Thank you, Richard.
Okay, thank you all. Bye-bye.